And it is such a pleasure to be with all of you tonight. I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about sustainability. The reason it's a critical responsibility we all share to create and maintain more sustainable systems, processes, and cities is critical not only to our lives today, but to the future of our planet. Now, the good news is that better leverage of information and communications technology can actually help us build a more sustainable and smarter planet. Let's look at some of the areas for improvement that we should consider. First of all, energy. We lose 6 to 10% of the energy we produce because our grids are not smart. They lose energy, they don't allow for renewable energies to be integrated. Transportation. I sit in traffic jams all the time. I sat in one today. The challenge with congestion and traffic congestion is that we waste so much money, so much fuel. In the US alone, we waste $115 billion a year because of all the fuel that's wasted sitting in traffic jams. Multiply that by all the other cities and countries around the planet. Add to that all the time we waste sitting in traffic jams and all the greenhouse gas emissions, and the impact is huge. Water. The need for potable water, for drinkable water, high-quality water is growing. Why is that? A lot of people are moving to cities. They can't just walk out and get some water in their backyard anymore. Actually, only 30% of the worldwide population lived in cities in 1950. Today, it's about 50%. And the projection by 2050 is that it will be 70% of the worldwide population will be in cities. So we really need to think about how we create a more sustainable environment, how we do more with less. So the real opportunity is to leverage this new integrating physical and digital infrastructure that we see out there with all of this instrumentation to be able to create more sustainable processes businesses, governments, and people need to be able to work with. Now let's look at some other good news before we go further. The good news is that tackling sustainability and the challenges is good for the planet and for the economy. Information and communications technology, if better leveraged, could drive $1 trillion a year in energy savings and 7.8 gigatons of CO2 equivalent abatement, based on this study called Smart 2020 by the Climate Group that was published a few years ago. And look at the areas they talk about: smart grids, which we'll talk a little bit about, smarter manufacturing, including industrial automation, smart logistics and supply chain, and smarter buildings. I just met a student that's working on construction, and we talked about smarter buildings today. Look at the impact that smart buildings could have. Better leveraging information and communications technology, driving over $300 billion a year in energy savings through our energy efficiency. And of the 4 areas on here, providing the most CO2 equivalent abatement. So how do we actually make these smarter systems and smarter solutions in a smarter planet? It's really not that complicated, but it can be very powerful. It's really all about leveraging all this instrumentation we have on the planet, the sensors, the meters, whether it's the Easy Pass that you have, the sensor in your car so they know when to charge you a toll, they know where you are and when you are and how fast you're going. Whether it's the sensors that are temperature sensors inside a building and outside a building, energy meters, water meters, gas meters, all of these instruments are gathering data. We take this data and then we integrate it. We integrate real-time data because the world is becoming more interconnected. You take the data, you compare it to historical data, and then you assess, is it high, is it low, is it good, is it bad? What can we do to optimize the outcome? And that's when you do modeling and analysis against the data. After that, you take the information, this intelligence you create, and then present it to people. We call it visualization, so you can read it on your laptop, on your iPhone, on some type of dashboard somewhere. Or you can actually create a machine-to-machine or M-to-M interface to bring it back up to where it was gathering the data initially and change the outcome. So what you're doing is leveraging this instrumented, interconnected, intelligent world to measure, monitor, model, and manage to improve the sustainability and create a smarter planet. So let's look at some examples of this. Smarter buildings. We've made a lot of progress over the past few years in leadership in energy and environmental design of buildings. Many of you have probably heard of LEED certifications that the United States Green Building Council created. The real opportunity now, though, is to go what we call from lead to leap, from leadership in energy and environmental design to leadership in energy and environmental performance. Because in fact, some of the lead design buildings do not perform very well. It's like studying for a test and still failing. What's the point? So what we need to do is leverage this information, these sensors and these meters, because what impact could we have? Well, look at this. Buildings consume 70% of the US energy that's generated. We generate 38% of greenhouse gas emissions from the energy for the buildings. And if you read a press release from a couple of years ago from Mayor Bloomberg in New York City, they say that 80% of the greenhouse gases in New York City are from the energy for the buildings. Huge numbers. And we waste a lot of the water and energy that goes into the buildings because it's lost. And what else? Actually, buildings create more carbon dioxide than all cars combined. Who would think that? But it's true. So our opportunity is to leverage this instrumentation, these sensors and meters, to gather this data, then interconnect it and create more of a holistic management of energy, water, assets, and the maintenance of the buildings. There are systems now where the people who manage the buildings with their names on their shirts, like Mike in our building where I work, he can actually look at all the information and he knows if there's the second compressor keeps going on, if the heating and air conditioning is on at the same time. Did you ever open your windows in the winter because it's too hot? That's a real waste of energy. And these systems allow you to see this information and take action. The business outcomes can be incredible. We've seen 10 to 40% improvements in energy usage, water usage, costs, and maintenance. And also, the assets last longer in the building, so the impact can be huge. There are some examples on this chart. In China, in the bottom left, the St. Regis Shanghai Hotel was actually opened as and commissioned as an intelligent building in 2002, if you can read Mandarin. You can see it when you go into the building. The Louvre in Paris just announced that they're going to be deploying smarter building technologies. On the top right at Tulane University in New Orleans, they actually have smarter building technologies that are helping them to reduce their energy use by 40%. And in the bottom right, there are some examples of IBM plants, one in Rochester, Minnesota, that's being able to reduce their energy use a lot. And in Burlington, Vermont, where we have a semiconductor fab site, they've actually been able to reduce their water use by 27%, the associated energy use, while increasing the manufacturing output of the plant over 30%. Now that's real sustainability, doing more with less. And as we have more people moving to cities, the need for energy and water increasing, and the industrializations of some of the growth markets, this is going to become more and more important for all of us. Smart grids. We have some really smart grids out there, but we need a lot more of them. Here's an example that the US Department of Energy did with their Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, which is by the Olympic Peninsula in the state of Washington in the US. And what they did is they worked with about 112 homes a few years ago. They took appliances and made them smarter appliances, like hot water heaters and dryers. They put grid-friendly adapters on them. And these appliances could tell how much the energy cost, and they could tell when the demand on the grid was higher because they were given signals by this smart grid. There were also smart meters in the home that the people in the home could actually program so that when the energy got to a certain cost, they would say, well, then you can reduce the heat or the air conditioning, by a few points and save some money. The impact was wonderful. Not only did the people reduce and the homes reduce their energy costs by 10%, but because the appliances were making smarter decisions and the people were making smarter decisions, they reduced the peak load on the grid by 15 to 50%. Now, luckily, we have a very regulated energy environment in the United States, so they have to meet a certain requirement so that we don't have brownouts and blackouts. But if you can maintain that lower level of peak load, you can reduce a lot of capital intensity to build more power plants going into the future. And you can see that they're saying that the people could see the difference right away. They made a difference because they had the information to manage the system themselves. Smarter transportation. Here's an example from Stockholm, Sweden. A very holistic, wonderful example because just like the last one with the smart grid, it had people in the mix. In Stockholm, Sweden, they had two major goals that they were trying to reach. One was they wanted to reduce traffic congestion, and the other was they wanted to improve the environment. So what they did is they put in a smarter transportation system, and you can see immediately the difference before and after, if you read Swedish, before and after, doesn't look that far off. So on the left, you can see all the headlights when the people are driving at a certain time of day. On the right, the next day, same time, same place. Dramatic improvement. The people could see it right away. Now, the city did something very smart, and they kept the people with them all the way through. They announced there was going to be a congestion tax, a congestion toll, so people were forewarned. They put more train capability in place, more mass transportation, so people had another option to get to work or to go into the city to play, whatever they were doing. And then they did this pilot. They actually found that they didn't have exactly the technology they needed, so they worked with some technology companies, found new optical character recognition technology that would actually be able to read the license plate so you can charge everybody and get your money that you're supposed to be getting. And then they put this congestion pricing scheme in place. They basically charged you more during rush hour to drive in certain places. As you can see, the results are very obvious, but look at some of the numbers. They reduced their traffic congestion by up to 25%, depending on what location in the city, and reduced their carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide emissions by 15 to 40%. Huge impact. So they did this pilot for about 7 months, and then they stopped it. And then they had a vote, they had a referendum, and the people voted to keep it because they could see the dramatic impact. And that's the other thing you really have to remember is when you're putting these smarter systems in place, it's not just the technology, the people have to use it. So make sure they keep them with you. They also brought in more money to increase the mass transportation and now have 40,000 more citizens using mass transportation. Now, after smarter transportation, we look at actually pulling this all together into a smarter city. And a great example of a smarter city is Rio de Janeiro. And if any of you looked at any of the TED Talks from last month in California at the big TED 2012 event, you may have seen the mayor from Rio de Janeiro who talked about his smarter city, where they've created an intelligent operations center that works 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Mayor Eduardo Paez said, a city of the future has to use technology to be present. Now, they have a couple of challenges. Every city has its own challenges, and you can start anywhere: transportation, water, energy, buildings. Where they needed to start was there are some flooding challenges in Rio, which some of you may have heard of. So what they did is they helped integrate some weather prediction tools, some public safety tools, and sensors, meters, and cameras around the city so that 24/7 they could see what was going on. They actually integrated 30 different systems, processes, and agencies from around the city. Now, why is this really important? Well, they care about the city, but also they're going to be having a lot of visitors. In 2014, they're going to be hosting the World Cup of Soccer, and in 2016, the Olympics. So they needed to get ahead of it. So you can see the Rio Operations Center right there in the middle, and the results have been wonderful. They've been able to do the flood prediction 48 hours in advance. They leverage this 1 kilometer or less weather prediction tool that they have. They can give traffic updates to improve traffic flow. It's safer, more content citizens that they have, and they'll be able to plan for these larger events. Now, let's talk about the advanced topics, and this is where I really hope you all think about this. We've talked about, as an example, intelligent transportation systems. Increase, congestion tolling so that people don't go there and you reduce traffic. That kind of makes sense. Then you look at smart grids and you create smart appliances and meters, and people and appliances can interact with this grid and make smarter decisions. That's pretty cool. We talked about smart buildings, about how you can be more energy efficient, and they can connect to the grid. And then also there are the options of different types of alternative energy. There's energy storage technologies which need to be improved. We talk about water management. But we kind of talked about these as all separate systems. What if you look at a smarter planet as a system of systems? And what if you do something like plop in electric vehicles into the mix, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles? Let's think about this. What if the charging scheme for charging your electric vehicle was such that it was lowest cost to charge it during rush hour? Now that's interesting. Then what you have is the automotive industry, energy storage and research, the smart grid, a smart city, and smart transportation and buildings all working together to potentially change traffic patterns. Reduce your energy costs of what it's going to cost to charge your electric vehicle because you do it when it's lower cost. change the amount of traffic at different times, maybe even make it rolling. Certain parts of the city, have it at different times, different prices, so that you can actually really change the traffic patterns. Looking at this as a system of systems. So a lot of you are going to be helping build our future and build a smarter planet. And I really encourage you to collaborate and think about how you can leverage the system of systems to make a more sustainable future. So what we've talked about is leveraging this instrumented, interconnected, intelligent world and using this information to measure, monitor, model, and manage what we're doing, going from improved design to improved performance and making a sustainable, better planet. Thank you.